If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Kendrick Lamar is the greatest rapper alive. No living artist possesses the same combination of creative capabilities and commercial success to the degree that Kendrick has sustained over the past decade. Although I'm still of the mindset that To Pimp a Butterfly is Kendrick's highest achievement, his 2017 project Damn is an album that has grown on me the more that I listen to it. It's a sophisticated examination of the human psyche, executed through Kendrick's signature blend of storytelling through allegory and anecdotes from his childhood in Compton and experiences in the music industry. But nothing encapsulates the strength of Kendrick's sophisticated lyricism quite like Fear. Today, I want to tell you why I believe this track is Kendrick's highest achievement and detail how Fear's structure and content is consistent with the wider trajectory of his career. And before we dive in, be sure to check out Dissect Podcast and Genius's deep dives on Fear as great resources for anyone who wants to dive into the material further. I've linked both below in case anyone's curious. Also, while you're here, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more song deep dives and artist breakdowns. Alright, let's get into some of the background on the track itself. The 12th track off the album, Fear examines 3 encounters with manifestations of Kendrick's anxieties, each occurring 10 years apart. The track is produced by prolific Eminem and Action Bronson collaborator The Alchemist, and Bakan. If the song's beat sounds familiar, that's because Kendrick previously rapped over the instrumental in his 2017 single The Heart Part 4. The Heart is a 4-part series of singles recorded between 2010 and 2017 that Kendrick uses as an opportunity to set the tone and promote his upcoming albums. The other sample featured on the track occurs in the opening moments, with a sample of Poverty's Paradise by the 24 Karat Black, setting the table for one of Kendrick's biggest fears, losing the wealth he's worked so hard to build. With the production of the track squared away, let's move into the importance of Fear's structure. There are 2 main factors why this track warrants such thorough analysis. The first, put simply, everything on the track is recurring, representing that Kendrick's Fear operates in perpetuity. The idea of recurrence is not strictly thematic, but carried out in the technique and intentional word choices throughout the song, and the album as a whole for that matter. The other is how each of the verses mirror the arc of Kendrick's career. 4 verses, 4 studio albums. The themes of each album are embedded in the verses and masked by analogies and anecdotes from Kendrick's own life. And as a note, I'm including Untitled Unmastered within the umbrella of To Pimp a Butterfly, as the EP is a collection of the album's outtakes anyways. Now let's see how these ideas are executed throughout the track. As I mentioned earlier, the track opens with a sample of Poverty's Paradise, which is used to foreshadow the culmination of Kendrick's Fear explored in the 3rd verse. The cold open is followed by a voicemail from Kendrick's cousin Carl, reminding Kendrick of his responsibilities to his loved ones by citing a verse from Deuteronomy 28. "The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart," Carl utters, urging Kendrick to overcome his feelings of spiritual abandonment and break his curse by accepting his identity as a Hebrew Israelite. This idea comes back at the end of the track and is incredibly loaded, so we'll tackle it towards the end. I'll also note that this intro voicemail is not incorporated as part of the physical release of the album. Most likely this is due to the physical space on the record, but an interesting choice nonetheless. We then move into the bridge, where we hear the voice of another real-life cousin of Kendrick, Ammo the War Child. This time, Ammo, as Kendrick's character, addresses God directly, seeking meaning behind his suffering. The recurring use of "why God" is an example of anaphora, defined as the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. This concept, common in poetry and speech writing, is utilized further in the 1st, 2nd, and 4th verses, in the form of "beat yo ass," "probably die," and "fear" respectively. Closing out the bridge, we hear a repetition of the opening sample, followed by the first appearance of the song's hook, this time played in reverse, a practice called backmasking. Kendrick's intentions behind this decision are disputed. Some say it's to depict going back in time, as the first verse moves into his childhood. Others draw similarities to the concept of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, tying back to the theme of curses being imposed upon him. The following verses, intercut with repetition of the hook, recount 3 periods of Kendrick's life with different manifestations of fear, as a child, an adolescent, and as an established adult. Upon the album's release, many critics drew comparisons between this structure and that of the film Moonlight, which was bestowed the Academy Award 2 months prior to Damn's 2017 release. No direct connection between the projects has been confirmed, but art often inspires other art. Before I break down each of the verses individually, let me set up how I view Kendrick's discography as a whole. I've theorized that Kendrick Lamar's album should be viewed as a narrative trilogy, with Section 80 serving as a prequel of sorts. Good Kid MAAD City, To Pimp A Butterfly, and Damn all tackle similar topics, with the main differentiating factor being the lens he examines them through: street level, macro, and micro. Good Kid MAAD City is Kendrick's view from his community standpoint, whereas To Pimp A Butterfly is addressing the macro societal and institutional implications. Finally, Damn is where Kendrick shifts from an external viewpoint to an internal, addressing how he himself is affected by the world around him. With this in mind, let's take a look at how each verse reflects my theory. The first verse is constructed as a series of fear tactics deployed by Kendrick's mother. Sticking with the religious comparisons, the warnings issued on this verse mirror the discipline of God. From Abraham to Job, who's mentioned by name in the fourth verse, God consistently tested biblical figures as a reminder of their pledge of faith and to provide an opportunity for growth. The restrictions Kendrick's mother imposed on him forced him on a path towards his destiny, but not without instilling a fear of never escaping these limitations. These restrictions are born out of necessity due to the circumstances of Kendrick's hometown. His mother outlaws any behavior that can threaten their way of life, such as blowing money on Jordans, putting her welfare in jeopardy, or following a path towards gang violence like many of his peers. This wide breadth of topics are the main themes explored on Kendrick's first studio album, Section 80, focusing on the realities of growing up in Compton. Though the religious allegory throughout this track resembles more of Kendrick's later work, it's his delve into his relationship with his family and the city he grew up in that are foundational to Section 80. These particular topics are explored further in both Fear's later verses and in Kendrick's later albums. Then, the second verse jumps to a 17-year-old Kendrick, and as he matures, so do the complexity of his fears. A 10-year time jump, Kendrick noted the intentionality behind using a decade, citing that the fear he experienced, quote, accumulated 10 times over. This time, it's a fear of death. One genius annotation from this verse points to a CDC study conducted in 2004, which found that the leading cause of death for black males between the ages of 15 and 19 was by homicide. Kendrick choosing 17 to manifest this type of fear is not only alluding to this study, but also links back to a reference in the second line, to the death of Trayvon Martin, who was 17 when he was murdered. The verse outlines many different ways Kendrick could die: gang violence, being falsely accused of a crime, buying drugs, breaking up an argument, or killed by a police officer. Many of these topics are covered throughout the duration of his second album, Kid MAAD City, capturing the influence of his own confrontations with gang violence, economic disenfranchisement, and the harsh realities of adolescence in Compton. The key factor that ties this verse to Kid MAAD City is that this fear of death is a reflection of Kendrick's own experience. The third verse jumps ahead another decade to a 27-year-old successful Kendrick Lamar. As mentioned at the top of the verse, his fear accumulated another 10 times over. This time manifesting into his anxieties over losing the wealth he's worked tirelessly to attain. From his viewpoint, the only escape from the curses imposed upon him are through financial freedom. He cites a few examples of how he could lose his wealth: spending too recklessly, tax issues, and directly invokes a 2015 lawsuit Rihanna filed against her management for mismanaging her finances. The topics discussed here shift away from exploring the pitfalls and realities of Compton and into a much more macro concept. This is the direction his third album, To Pimp A Butterfly, takes: a larger view at the institutional obstacles and consequential actions that have caused situations much like Compton. It's important to note that Kendrick released To Pimp A Butterfly when he was 27 as well, meaning the verse itself reflects his exact headspace following the album's universal critical and commercial acclaim. The verse also references tracks like Wesley's Theory and Mortal Man, marking this verse a direct continuation of To Pimp A Butterfly's themes. The final verse, directly following the third verse without a chorus in between, takes a step back and examines Kendrick's fears at the time of the album's recording. Of course, this verse calls out the other tracks from Damn by name: Humble, Loyalty, Pride, DNA, God, and Love, and directly refers to the essential question of the album: is it wickedness or weakness? Tracking the themes of Kendrick's projects explored to this point, Section 80 is a loose yet holistic view of the topics plaguing Kendrick at that point. Good Kid MAAD City is a much more cinematic approach to life in Compton, told through a non-linear vignette. To Pimp A Butterfly is his magnum opus, addressing larger scale issues through cohesive storytelling. But Damn is a drastic change in direction, going much more micro, tackling his own psyche and how the larger societal issues he's addressed previously affect his own emotions and values. If you're listening to the album based on the original track listing, this verse is the album's climax. It's the moment where everything addressed previously finally comes to a head, seemingly almost cracking underneath the weight of Kendrick's own fear. He's attained success, but for what? His humility to subside? For the love in his life to fade away? It's astounding the gravity of these types of questions. But ultimately, he reaches a distinct conclusion with the line, quote, "What happens on earth stays on earth, and I can't take these feelings with me, so hopefully they disperse." The only way for him to be relieved of his curses is to make the changes he wants to see through his music, because his art will live long after he's gone. His fear of not achieving his dreams, his fear of death, his fear of losing all he's built, all go away when he focuses on speaking his truth and making art that lasts, through 14 tracks carried out over wax. And with this epiphany, Mr. Duckworth circles back to address the track's beginning. After a brief bridge from Pecan, damning you, me, us, and we, Kendrick returns to the voicemail from cousin Carl. Continuing to quote scripture, Carl doubles down on his perspective and concludes the voicemail praying for Kendrick and blessing him, doing so when no one else would. The voicemails are a fascinating bookend for the track, bringing back the recurring themes of faith and its relationship with Kendrick's life experiences. One last thing before we conclude. I know I glossed over analyzing the hook, so let me just take a moment and shed some light on how it ties in. Ironically, the chorus may be the most inconsequential portion of the track. My interpretation is that it symbolizes temptation, that getting high could provide a short refuge from the fear Kendrick is experiencing. However, this can only be a temporary solution. Kendrick, who in real life is sober, uses this as an opportunity to allude to the idea that the only way to truly break the cycle is to confront his fears directly. No shortcuts. Alright, this has been a lot of analysis, so let's just take an opportunity to put a bow on this. So it's about that time for me to address the title of this video, why I think fear is Kendrick's highest achievement. I think the larger beauty of Kendrick's work is how cohesive his albums feel when you listen to them, which often makes picking a single track to crown as his greatest hit feel a bit hollow. But for damn at the minimum, Fear just fulfills everything I'm looking for out of an artist. It's conceptual and intentional. The concept of addressing the manifestations of his own fear mixed with existential feelings of abandonment, executed through intentional practices such as anecdotal storytelling, assonance, and anaphora, warrant the Pulitzer he won for this album alone. Kendrick is a generational talent, and I hope that this exploration into fear has convinced anyone who hasn't given damn the praise it deserves a second chance. Diving deep into this track has stirred up incredible excitement over the possibilities of what a 2021 Kendrick album could look like. And the only thing left to fear is fear itself. That's all for today, and once again, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe and share. Check out our podcast feed in the description below if you're into that sort of thing as well. For now, my name is Ben Taub, and thank you for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.